Hello, Algebra kids. Let's get going on the review here for the Chapter 5 test. First question is, which graph represents a linear function? So there's two different things here. We got linear and function. Okay, so linear means a line, one line. A function means that if you draw a vertical line anywhere through the graph, it will only hit the graph in one spot. If it hits it in two spots, it's not a function. So let's look at the options here. Got these two options. This is a function. No matter where I draw a line, it hits it in one spot. There, 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 there. This is also a function. No matter where I draw it, it hits it in one spot. The question then becomes linear. Which one's a line? And it's B. That's not a line. All right. Next up, we have to do these ordered pairs satisfy a linear function. So first of all, we have to see if it's even a function. Okay, so when we look at this, oh dear, the x's are the same. This is from last chapter. And if the x's are the same and they go to different numbers, it's not a function. Each x doesn't map to only one y. Now let's say there were some different ones. Let's say it was, I'm just going to show you an example, 1, -5, and 2, and -10, and 3, and -15. Let's say that was what we were doing instead. When you look at something like that, since you're like, okay, it is a function. All my x's do go, I have different x's, so it is a function. Well, then you have to compare the x's and compare the y's. So you have to look from here to here, it went up 1. From here to here, it went up 1. So my x's are going up by 1. Now I gotta look at my y's. My y's are going down 5. Going down 5. So yes, it appears that my y's are also consistent. These don't have to be the same number, but they have to be consistent. So this is going up by 1, this is going down by 5 consistently. So this one, if I had given you this instead of this would be a linear function. And sometimes, remember, they list them like this. 1, -5, 2, -10, 3, -15. So you can list coordinates like that too, or you can put them in a table. So you would have to then compare the x to the x, going up 1, going up 1. That has a pattern, yes. Going down 5, going down 5. So you have to be able to add or subtract, not multiply or divide, add or subtract consistently up and down. All right, the x-intercept of find the x-intercept and find the y. Okay, so remember, if you're going to look for the x-intercept, you're going to cover up the y. So if I cover up that y, what do you have? X equals 20. And if you're going to cover, if I need the y-intercept, then I cover up the x, and I have 5y equals 20. So you'd have to solve that. So you would divide both sides by 5. And you would have y equals 4. Good. Find the slope of these 2 points. So remember slope, which you'll be able to use on the test, your formulas, is that. And the biggest thing is to make sure you put the y's on the top, the x on the bottom. Remember, x is first and y is second. And also to make sure that you don't make a mistake with negatives and go the same direction. So I'm going to go from this point to this point. So do the y's first. 8 minus 1 over, I'm going to do the x's. 6 minus 2. And I got 7/4. So you just leave it like that. That's your answer. You don't have to do any dividing or anything. Just leave it as a fraction. All right, now we're going to check out and find the slope of this line. The slope of this line is, and you're supposed to say if it's positive, negative, 0, or undefined. So in this case, remember if you're going uphill, it's positive, and then when we go downhill, it is negative. But let's just practice getting the slope from this anyway. So you can count rise over run, or you can find 2 points and do the exact same thing we did here. So I'm going to show you how to do it counting on the graph. So I got to look for 2 coordinates. Here's one. See, this one hits right in the middle, so I don't like that one. But this one hits right at another intersection point. You could also pick this one. Any 2. You're going to get the same thing. So start at one point and go to the other. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to rise to 1, 2, and run negative 1. So my answer is a negative 2. Now if you would have started here, you would have been rise 1, 2. So that's down 2. So that would have been a negative 2 over running positive 1. You still get a negative 2. But it doesn't matter where you go, but you don't start in the middle. You start at one point and you go to another point. All right. Write the equation describing the line with slope of 5 and y-intercept of negative 3. Okay, so we know the generic form is mx plus b. Remember, m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. And they give you those, so you just have to put them in there. So y stays. Now instead of m, we're going to put the 5. X stays plus y-intercept is negative 3. You could also write minus 3 because plus a negative is the same as a minus, and they both would be perfectly fine. Number 7 is write an equation in, now we're switching gears here to point slope. This one actually didn't say, but we just use that the most, so that's always my go-to. But this one, again, you have all these given to you. And we are going to just substitute these values in there and we'll be done. My slope, remember, is my m. And this is my x1 and my y1. So it's the second part of each of them. So make sure you don't mix those up, though, and put the x here. So it's y, that stays, minus the y1, which is 6, equals slope, 3/5, times x, that stays, minus, make sure you put your minuses in there, a negative 2. Now that is correct. If you want to go one step further and also notice that subtracting a negative is the same as adding, either of these would be acceptable. Okay, onto the back side here. Graph the equation with this. Okay, so you need to look in that equation and tell me what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. So what is the slope? That's right, it's right before the x, it's a negative 1/2. And what is the y-intercept? That's right, it's right here, it's number 4. Because remember, here's my formula. Feel free to write that multiple times across your test when you're working so that you can always have it right in front of you. So, which one do you graph first? Yes, the y-intercept. So I go to my y-axis and I go to positive 4 and I put a dot. It's a bad graph. All the lines are pretty much gone. Now I have a negative 1/2. So remember, the negative can go on the top or it can go on the bottom, but it can't go on both. So I always just typically put it in the top unless it brings me off the graph. So I start at that y-intercept and I'm going to rise negative 1. and run positive 2. I think I'm a little off. I think it's right there. Grab your straight edge. And you're done. Okay, so you just pull out the slope and pull out the y-intercept. Graph this first and do the slope from it. All right, number 9, which lines are parallel? Remember, again, back to our equation. This is our slope. And if the slopes are equal, lines are parallel. So we can locate the slope in each of these. I'm going to start actually with this one right here. That's the easiest one because the slope is right there. 2. And the slope in here is very easy as well because it's already in the right form. Y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b. So you don't have to solve or do anything to those. It's actually in there too, isn't it? It's right before the x, which is a 1. So I got that slope. Now, do you remember what the slope of y equals 2 is? Remember, when you see y equals, it's a horizontal line where the slope, it's a slope on a horizontal line that's going like that. That's not horizontal, but let's try to make it. Slope is 0, right? It's like cross-country skiing here. Slope is 0. So we got a 0, a 2, a 1, and a 2. Which ones are parallel? Well, the ones with the same slope, which is 3 and 4. And remember the other, this is y equals x equals, like, let's say 2 is a vertical line. That goes up and down, and that has an undefined slope. This one has a slope of 0. What is the slope of a line perpendicular to this? Okay, so up here we talked about how slopes that are parallel are equal. Well, when it's perpendicular, you find that slope, and remember you do 2 things. You flip the sign and do the reciprocal. So I'm going to take that negative 3 and I'm going to flip the sign and make it a positive. And now I'm going to do the reciprocal. Well, 3 is the same as 3 over 1, right? Same thing. Now do the reciprocal. 1 over 3. Number 11, write an equation in slope-intercept form. So as soon as they tell me that, I want to write that down so I can have that in my head, where I'm heading, because it's telling me right there, write an equation in this form for a line that passes through this point. So when they give me a point, I know they've given me an x and a y. Described by, I'm sorry, I'm skipping a whole line, and is perpendicular to this line. Okay, so if you have one line and you're looking for a slope another line that's perpendicular to it, the only thing in common is one point, and we don't know if that's the point. But we know that that's on that line somewhere. What we do know is if you have perpendicular slopes, those 2 things happen. So if I go in here and take this slope out, which is 1/8, and I do those 2 things to it, I flip the sign and I take the reciprocal, I know I have my new slope. So I'm going to flip the sign, make it a negative, and I'm going to do the reciprocal, which is 8 over 1, which is also just 8, right? So this is the same as negative 8. That is the slope up here, negative 8x plus b. I don't need this equation anymore. I'm not going to use that for. I'm done using that. I just needed to get that slope out of there. Now what I have is I have an x and a y. So I can plug in my x and my y, figure out b, and then go back up and put it in there. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put the negative 1 in for the y. I'm going to put the 0 in for the x and solve. Anything times 0 is 0. So b is equal to a negative 1. So I go back up to this equation right here. And I put, it's not erasable, so I can't erase it. And I put that negative 1 in there for b, and I'm done. Of course, you can write it like this as well. Either way is fine. Okay, so once you gotta get the slope first. Then plug in your point, solve, and go back and put it in. That's one of the tougher ones, for sure. We're going to skip this one, because we could skip that. 13, midpoints. Midpoints, think of 2 points, 2 coordinates. Trying to find the middle coordinate. So your answer should be a coordinate. And those are the sides. So if you're trying to find the middle of them, you're going to average them out. So you're going to take your x's, 3 and negative 5, and add them together and divide by 2. You're going to take your y's, negative 6 and 2, add them together and divide by 2. I'm averaging these. So 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2, divided by 2 is negative 1. Negative 6 plus 2 is a negative 4. Divided by 2 is a negative 2. And I'm done. Remember the Oreo cookie thing that I was talking about in class was when they gave you the middle. Now they're giving you the 2 cookie parts. And you're trying to find that middle one now. So you're trying to say what's halfway between these two. So negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. Halfway between negative 6 and positive 2 is negative 2. All right, now look what the key word is. So up here it was midpoint. That's a coordinate. Here it is distance. That's a length. So that's when that grand old square root comes in, which again you have this. It says this. So now you just have to be careful when you plug in. Subtracting them. So x is first, so 5 minus 1 squared plus, now y's, 6 minus 3 squared. Let's do this part, and remember when I square I get a positive. When I square I get a positive. So you should be adding 2 positives here. 5 minus 1 is 4. Squared is 16 plus. 6 minus 3 is 3. Squared is 9. So we have the square root of 16 plus 9. You do that first. Oh, 25. This is going to be slick. Square root of 25 is 5 units. So even if you had done this the other way and you had 1 minus 5 and 3 minus 6, yeah, you get a negative in here. You get a negative 4. But when you square it, it's still positive when it comes down here. Same thing here. All right, and we're going to skip 15. So there you go. Not too bad. 18 minutes and 56 seconds. Have a great day.